Yeah, I won't share anything specific, but
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, the big thing in your background that I think is pretty fascinating is you going to Stanford Law School and how you got there because it's so competitive.
yeah, and I was not raised to be a Stanford kind of person. I felt very out of my league there, but I think I did well. And but yeah, I ended up there because I really wanted to be a public defender, and so that's what I did all throughout law school. That was my focus, was public defense. Um, And when I started practicing after law school, I realized that it wasn't actually something that I enjoyed doing. It's a I have so much respect for people who have done public defense. I know one of our attorneys, Marvin, has done quite a bit of it, and it's such a hard job. Um, it's really emotionally draining. And so I realized what I really love most about the job was connecting with clients, but the being in the courtroom was very stressful for me. And so what I do now is much more my speed, where I get to talk to clients all day and hear people out. I think I'm very empathetic, and so I get to use, my ability to connect with people to make that initial phone call, that and have that initial trust with people and tell them about our firm and what we can do for them. And so I think that's a much better fit for me. But yeah, I did practice as an attorney for a while, and I was told by many people that I was very good at it, but it just was not my passion.
What made you want to be a public defender out of all the things that you could have done with your law career?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I was really moved. I studied sociology and philosophy in college, and I was really moved by just how vulnerable people are who are stuck in our criminal justice system with no means of defending themselves. A lot of people end up there because of you know, societal failures. And so having someone to advocate for them and get them the help that they actually need is really helpful. There's a lot of helpful things that can happen in prison, but if you don't have someone advocating for you, you might not have access to those resources that could actually get you out of that system. And so I think one of the things I was trying to do was to be that advocate for people to get them out of that system that some people get stuck in.
Yeah, but did you have like a certain experience that made you want to fight for the people who are maybe underrepresented?
I would say it is sort of a series of experiences. So I met quite a few people in college who had come from underprivileged backgrounds and had ended up in either in the system or could have been in the system, right? I had a very close friend of mine who I cared deeply for, who got stuck in a gang at like 12 or 13 years old and finally got his way out. And I met him after he was out, but just hearing the stories of what he went through and the ways that he could have really ended up stuck in that system, like so many people do, it really gave me, it broke my heart, honestly, because I grew up kind of sheltered, and so I was new for me to learn that someone could have lived a life like that. And so I think it just pulled at my heartstrings in a way that made me want to be. I think I noticed that there was not a lot of empathy for these people in general in our society, and because I had that, I felt this sort of calling to like act on that because not a lot of people understand people who are stuck in that, and they will blame those people. And yeah, there's some responsibility that needs to be taken, but I feel like I was able to hold those things and still see these people as human, which is so tough. And that was a lot of the feedback I got as an attorney in that field, was that these people, just even when I wasn't able to get the outcome that we wanted because our system is so sort of tailored to be against these people. And in a lot of cases, they were guilty. And so it's tough, you don't always get the outcome you want, but even when I didn't get them what we would call a successful outcome, I would have them, a lot of my clients would come to me so grateful because I was one of the first people in their lives to actually treat them like a human being, which is just so sad. And that's one of the reasons it was
Yeah.
really emotionally draining to do that job. But it's also why I think it's so important.
Yeah, when you meet some of the underprivileged people and you really get to know them, then it's like, like you're saying, you get to know them as a human. It just changes your whole perception on some of the people who have unfortunately been in circumstances that have led them down a bad road.
Yeah.
But generally, if you have a good outlook that people are generally good, then you can find um, their path and where they went astray, and it
Hmm.
not always is their fault. That's one of the things about traveling that is so educational is you go to some of these other countries and it
Hmm.
it cuts through stereotypes because you see how good people are all across the world. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what does it take to become to even get into Stanford Law School? Like, what does it take? What kind of grades do you need? What kind of scores do you need? What kind of activities do you need to get? Because
Yeah.
uh, it's a top three law school in the nation,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well,
and yeah,
LSAT scores are really important. And so I remember sort of making studying for the LSAT my full-time job for a few months before I took the test because a lot of people have to take that test multiple times to get a score that's good enough to get into whatever school you want to go to. So I think if I'm remembering correctly, the minimum score that you needed to have in order to even be considered for Stanford was like 170, 171, something like that.
wow,
Uh,
that's extremely high because I know because I
yes.
took the LSAT as well.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
extremely high. And the other thing about the LSAT is it's really hard to study for.
It is. Yeah, it's really tough. It's all I mean, you can take courses, but I didn't have the money to do that. And so I was all, self-taught and I used secondhand books that were already written in because that's what I could
Yeah.
afford. It's very expensive to study for the LSAT.
Well,
The
and I
materials are
actually,
expensive.
yeah, I actually took a course, but my score didn't change from pre-course to
Mm,
post-course. And the teacher actually said, your score may not change because the
yeah.
top end pretty much is what you're learning in the course is to avoid the bottom end of your ability to take the test. So,
Hmm.
but the top end doesn't change. It's not like you
Hmm.
get smarter in 3 months. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's just what
There's
you.
some skills that you can learn as you go. Like I remember the logic games being extremely difficult for me. Anybody who's studied the LSAT knows that's one of the sections of the test. It used to be extremely difficult for me when I started. That was one of my lowest scores, and then that ended up being one of my highest scores by the end because I there's certain tricks that you can learn, and I don't know if it's like a for me it felt like something just clicked at some point and I started getting it. Um, but
What's
with the
what's
other
the
sections, it's
yeah?
tougher.
What's the perfect score on an LSAT?
I don't remember. I believe it's 180.
Yeah, it's 180. So
Yeah. Yeah.
171 plus puts you in like rare
Yeah.
air. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was when I was studying for the test, I was testing sort of an average of 170, I would say, by the time I took the test. So I was very nervous
Would
about
you
what
when
my
you
score was
so
going to
what'd you end
be.
up getting?
172.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That is so
Yeah.
awesome. And
Yep.
then how about grades wise? What do you need grades wise?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the like threshold would be, but I had I think a 3.98
Yeah.
GP like uh unweighted GPA. And I think 3.8 or higher maybe is what my guess would be for
Yeah.
getting into a school
But
like
even
Stanford.
that, yeah, it doesn't mean you get in because there's a ton of
Right.
people with a high GPA and good
Yeah.
scores. So,
I
yeah.
think the essay matters a lot. I spent months on my personal essay. And that really like tells a story about who you are, right? And so I think I have had a number of life experiences that I think I was able to include in that essay that made me interesting as a candidate. So
Mhm.
I've like traveled to different countries. I have traveled to Rwanda. I talked a little bit about what I learned about the Rwandan genocide and how that impacted me and made me want to be a public defender. I've traveled to Uganda. Mexico a couple of times. And so I was able to talk about those experiences. Um, and also I was able to talk about my experience being first generation college student. So both of my parents went to college for like a year, but neither of them graduated. And so I was the first one in my family, immediate family, to graduate from college. So I think that also made me more of an interesting candidate. And in my essay, I was able to talk about how that shaped me as a person, right? Like going into college with no real expectation, no real like support or advice about what to expect was really tough. Um, Luckily, I went to Pepperdine for undergrad, Pepperdine in California. And luckily, they had a program for first generation college students. So I was able to kind of go get a tour of the school for a few days with some other first gens before I even started, which was great. But it's just so overwhelming when you don't have a parent or someone close to you to be able to tell you what to expect. And I was also traveling from Connecticut all the way to California. So I had no support, really had to grow up very fast. And so I think including that in my essay, I think also showed that I am willing to do a lot of hard work and that I can make a lot out of a little.
Were you always smart? Like, did you always do well in school?
I did. It's actually funny because after I graduated from law school, I got diagnosed with ADHD, which I know a lot of people these days are noticing they're getting that diagnosis. And I was never even considered because I got such good grades in school. And it used to be that that was an exclusionary, criteria for ADHD. But yeah, I did. I always did really well in school. I think uh, I always had a drive for it. I have a little bit of perfectionism in me, so some of that, played into it. Um, and I just really enjoyed learning.
So your
Yeah.
parents didn't push you to excel at school? You kind of did that on your own, or did your parents
They
also?
they definitely encouraged me. They were very, very supportive. But neither of my other siblings did amazing in school. It wasn't like
Mhm.
they wanted us like that wasn't a super high priority for them in terms of like they wouldn't punish us for not doing well. I think
Mhm.
I just had a particular drive more than my other siblings to really do well. I think I also was drawn toward other people in school who were doing well. Like my friends were all top performers. And so I felt a little bit motivated by that. Like, for example, in high school, I remember trying really hard to get into the AP classes because I wanted to be with my friends in class.
Oh,
So that
that's
was
cute.
probably part of it too. Yeah.
And so being diagnosed with ADHD, how do you do so well in school with ADHD? I mean, isn't that uh don't you bounce around in thoughts and I mean, isn't
Yeah.
that what that is?
Yeah, for
Like, how do
sure.
you focus then? Yeah.
Well, ADHD definitely it presents differently in boys and girls. And so I don't know, a lot of people might not know that because we've learned a lot over the last 10 years about ADHD that we didn't know. So my brother also has ADHD and he was diagnosed when he was young because he was kind of obviously bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
Whereas my hyperactivity was more internal. So I was very anxious. And I think that's why I was able to do so well in school. I actually have this memory of staying up till like 1 or 2 in the morning finishing a paper and on my mom's computer, and she came into the room sleepy because she was about to go to sleep, and she's like, you don't have to finish the paper, it's not the end of the world if you get a bad grade. And I'm
Mhm.
like, no, I'm finishing, because I was so anxious about getting a bad grade. So I think anxiety masked some of my ADHD.
Mhm.
And I think that showed up later in life, which is another aspect of ADHD that isn't talked about a lot. Your symptoms can get worse as you get older, especially in your 20s. And so, right around the time I was graduating law school, my ADHD symptoms did get a lot worse. And my anxiety started to show up. And so, that's one of the reasons why I decided public defense was not for me, because it's a very anxiety inducing job. And I already had a ton of anxiety that had never been diagnosed or dealt with. So,
Well, so how were you able to travel during going to school and everything? Were you traveling before you went to Stanford? Because that was in your essay. Um,
yeah. So
yeah.
my trips to Mexico actually were in high school. I was involved in church at the time, a Christian church, and we did some mission trips to Mexico. So I was part of those in high school. And then in college, I actually had the chance to travel as part of my schooling. So the my trips to Rwanda and Uganda were through Pepperdine. They had a summer program where you could go and learn about. We were actually there to learn about nonprofit organizations that are operating there.
And what did you learn from those trips? What did you come back with?
Oh, so much. A lot. But I think the main takeaway that really stuck with me from those trips was going to the Genocide Memorial Museum in Rwanda. Um, I don't know. I don't think a lot of people, if unless you've studied it, would know about this, but there was a huge genocide in Rwanda. Gosh, I don't remember what year it was, but it must have been 20 years ago now, because I think at the time that I went, it had been 10 years or something. Um, don't quote me on that. But
Mhm.
yeah, I remember going to the Memorial Museum, and there was this particular moment where um, so the genocide was there were these two groups in Rwanda that were um, opposed to each other, and the one in power ended up committing a huge genocide against the other group. And after that happened, everybody had to come together at some point, right, and rebuild after that. And so I was able to sit in a room with a someone whose parents were part of the oppressive group and someone whose parents were part of the oppressed group, and
Hmm.
they were able to sit in the same room and have a conversation about what that rebuilding looks like. And it was this really um, oh gosh, really moving, sort of heavy conversation that I don't know if I've ever experienced anything like it, because you just know, I mean, this person, the person who had been, whose family, whose ancestors had been literally killed, indiscriminately by this other person's ancestors. And they were able to sit down and have a conversation about how important it is to not, hold this person to what their ancestors have done, and what it looks like to rebuild and make sure that people are educated about what happened so that it doesn't happen again. That was just really, really moving. I think that's what stuck with me the most.
Was it political parties or was it ethnic based?
I believe it was ethnic based. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
how many people ended up dying in that? Do you
Oh
know?
gosh, I don't remember the numbers. It was a lot though. I remember in the museum they had it was very almost gruesome, but in like a in an educational important way, I think. I remember there was a room where they had piles of actual human bones that had been recovered from mass graves. Yeah, it was a lot. I don't remember the
Wow.
exact numbers, but yeah.
That's amazing though that you got to participate
Hmm.
in seeing the rebuild and what yeah, that's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about hiring attorneys because I think there's kind of two different groups for me. There's like kind of your standard soft tissue car accident case that it definitely disrupts a person's life, but
Hmm.
it's not catastrophic, it's not permanent. It's just kind of like a 3 to 6 month type disruption in a person's life.
Right.
And then there's the other case where it actually significantly changes the course of your life, an injury that unfortunately you might have to deal with for a very, very long time.
Hmm.
And so I don't, my personal opinion is that the attorney that's handling this smaller disruption, um, that matters less.
Yeah.
And it just, although it still could matter even then.
I would agree with that though. I
Yeah.
think especially, I mean, I think the team that you're working with matters, right? Like you want to have a team that cares about you, but at a firm like ours too, like a lot of the day-to-day work on your case isn't even done by your attorney when your case is more minor like that. It's really your case manager, your legal assistants, the people that are contacting you on a daily basis that you want to have a good relationship with.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So what if somebody suffers a catastrophic injury or a more permanent type injury? obviously due to somebody else's negligence. So you can't just suffer the injury and then get a lawyer for it. It
Hmm.
has to be because somebody else did something that they shouldn't have done. And then as a result, you have this injury. How would you go about looking for an attorney? So, and not necessarily our firm, but like when we're talking to people out there who are looking for lawyers to handle their case, what would be the first thing you would do?
Yeah, good question. I think my first step would be to look on Google, which seems sort of basic, but I think Google does a good job of presenting different firms. And so, for example, they have Google reviews, and Google rates different firms based on their responsiveness and um, other metrics that I think gives you a good picture of whether this is a firm that's going to be responsive to you, just sort of as a baseline, right? And then the Google reviews, you can actually look at what previous clients' experience have been. So I think with a major injury, it's really important to have a good relationship with your attorney, but also with the firm that you're working with. Like I said, at our firm at least, and I'm sure at others, that you're going to be working with a team of people. And so you want to have a good relationship with the firm itself. And I think seeing what other people have experienced with that firm tells a lot. Um, so that's where I would start. And if they've got good Google reviews, then I would go to the website. I would look at a few different firms because you want to make sure you're doing your research. And different firms have different specialties and stuff. So you want to find a firm that will be have expertise in the type of injury that you suffered. But I would then look at the website, and then when you're looking at the website, I would hone in on the attorney bios because that's where you're going to see what kind of experience do these attorneys have. They're actually going to be working on my case, right? Do they have trial experience with a catastrophic injury? Oftentimes, those cases need to be litigated. And a lot of firms that do personal injury don't do a ton of litigation, right? A lot of these cases, the vast majority of smaller cases settle before it ever goes to trial. And so, on a personal note, just as an anecdote, I had a friend recently who was in a car accident. Um, it was a pretty, she had some pretty major injuries, but they were hoping to settle before trial and they weren't able to. And so it went to arbitration, I believe. And this firm was recommended to her by a friend. Um, they had good reviews in terms of their settlement, negotiations, but they ended up losing the result that they wanted because of a procedural error, right? Which is like
Mhm.
that's something that tells me, okay, they don't have enough experience, right, doing these kinds of things because once it goes to arbitration and trial, legal deadlines, legal rules matter much more, right? You're not just now talking in negotiations, you're now in court, doing legal proceedings. And so having that experience really matters. And I think that matters a lot for catastrophic injuries because there's a higher chance that those are going to need to be litigated.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, you Google reviews to begin with, and then attorney bios. And then what are you looking for when you're looking at attorney bios? So you're looking at experience,
Yep.
um, trial experience, obviously, is an important key. And then what else are you looking for?
Yeah, well, I think experience, just to be more specific, in that particular field is really important, right?
Mm.
I think a lot of people don't understand how lawyers are trained, but when you leave law school, most lawyers are not actually trained in, the specific thing that they're getting ready to do. So having a lot of years of experience doing that particular area of law, that's how much learning they've had to actually get the experience and knowledge and skills in that field. So a divorce attorney, a very good divorce attorney might be a terrible personal injury lawyer, right? Because they don't have the experience. And so having experience in personal injury law is really important.
And even
And
within personal injury, there's like premise liability and there's medical
mhm,
malpractice, there's car accidents, truck accidents, so there's
yeah,
various specialties even within that.
yeah, absolutely. I think the more specific the bios can get about the experience the attorney has, the better, because then you can learn more. You can also ask when you're consulting with firms, have how many of these types of cases have you done? I think that's good, especially if you have more of a unique case or like a medical malpractice case. Those are all very, I mean, medical malpractice is so varied. And so finding a firm that's got expertise in the type of injury you have can be really helpful.
Yeah. How about locality? Like, is it important, like if you were injured in Tacoma or you live in Tacoma, or is it important to get an attorney in Tacoma, or, how close does the attorney need to be for it to matter?
Yeah, well, I think as a general rule, if the attorney is in the same state as you, then you're pretty much good to go. I know for our firm, we do a lot of work remotely, and courts are much more lenient, especially since COVID, with doing things remotely. And so it doesn't matter as much to be super close. I think the time that that would matter is if you need help finding a provider near you. For example, I know that our firm, we have locations in Tacoma, Federal Way, and Everett now. And so it's a lot easier for us to provide recommendations to clients who are in those areas
Hmm.
or nearby for providers that we've worked with that we know we can trust, that we've gotten good reviews from other clients, you know. So if that's important to you, if you're having trouble finding a provider for your particular injury, that could be an important thing. But other than that, I think as long as you're in the same state, and the reason why it's important to be in the same state is because different states have different laws around personal injury. So there's different um, time periods within which you need to bring the claim. And there's various different legal nuances that might differ from state to state. So having an attorney in your state is very important. And of course, they need to be licensed to practice in the state where they're filing a claim if it needs to be filed. So I think the state is very important. And then in terms of, you know, cities or more specific localities, it's really personal preference and your specific needs around your case.
How about years of experience? Is there like a cutoff point? It's like I wouldn't hire anybody who has less than X amount of years of experience as a lawyer for a catastrophic case.
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know about a cutoff, but I think, I mean, the more experience, the better. I think, gosh, yeah, putting a cutoff is hard, but for me, maybe 5 years or more. It's tough because their results also matter, right? Experience isn't the only thing that matters. You want to know that they can actually are actually good at what they're doing. But I think the more years they've had doing this type of law, the more they've learned. Because you don't learn everything in law school, you know, and many professionals, I'm sure this is true for many professionals, that you really learn on the job. So the more years of experience they have, the more they've been learning, the more the skills they've acquired, hopefully. So yeah, in terms of a cutoff, I think that's hard to say, but
Yeah,
um,
5 years kind of, plus
that
or minus
feels
feels
about
pretty
right.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because once you've been in this field for 5 years plus, you've learned most of what you're going to learn going forward. Although, everybody continues to learn throughout, but the big chunk of the learning comes in those first 2, 3 years, and then you start to hone your skills in the last 4 or 5. So I kind of feel
Yeah.
like 5 years is a pretty good point. And then also at the bottom, at the top end of that, um, attorneys get tired, you know,
Right.
and they kind of lose their drive to perfect their craft, and they kind of, some of them get lazy, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
some not, some still, like somebody like Marv, who's still, he's 30 years into the game and still working
Hmm.
hard and
Hmm.
has a ton of pride. But other lawyers, they get tired and they kind of get set in their ways. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, years on the job doesn't always mean a ton, but at least getting past that first 5 years. And
Yeah.
then what you were talking about, which is, the results, like that
Yeah.
matters a ton.
Hmm.
So how do you figure out what their results are or what they've been?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes they'll list them on their website. I know a lot of firms will, you know, want to advertise the good results they're getting. Google reviews is another place where some people will talk about, you know, how successful their case was. Um, I'm not sure how else. I guess There must be some public records of different results, but I'm not exactly sure
Yeah, I think
how to
generally,
verify.
yeah, if they've gotten good results, they'll publish it on their website. But not
Yeah.
always, so sometimes it's asking a friend who's in the field who actually
Hmm.
knows because like I know there's some firms out there who have great reviews, who have multiple offices, but and they've had some good results, but that's just purely by volume. It's not because this particular attorney is anything special, and it's hard to know
Right.
because you can see the results on their webpage, and it's just like, wow, they've gotten a lot of good results. But then if you really know these firms, you would also know that, okay, maybe they associated out in order to get
Right.
that result. Or
Right.
maybe, they had a catastrophic case that actually would have been worth more in the hands of a different lawyer. Yeah, so
Hmm.
so talk about that. Like, let's say you have this same exact facts and it goes to two different firms and how divergent the settlements or the verdicts could be.
Oh, yeah. Well, settlements and verdicts can be really varied, even on the same set of facts. Um, if you research, I research medical malpractice cases all the time because I'm the primary person who's evaluating those cases that come into us. And so I'm always looking to see what kinds of injuries, get different types of settlements. And um, well, first of all, if a case settles, it's usually going to be lower than what you could get at trial if you have a good trial attorney, right? If you succeed at trial, it's harder to succeed at trial, but you can get a higher settlement often. For example, I was recently looking up a specific type of injury. It was a type of shoulder surgery. And when those are litigated, um, they could be 1.8 million average verdicts versus settling before trial, like less than half a million, you know?
Mhm.
So huge variety of where a case could go just to show that. And that's not just the difference between settlement and verdict, but, your attorney knowing how much the case can be valued at. Um, there's a lot of different ways to add value to a case. And so that's also why I think experience is important in a particular area, right? Because different attorneys might have different views on how to add value to the case. Different providers you can see. I know that our firm, we're very careful to assess whether someone has a traumatic brain injury, for example, because those can be really, really severe, can affect you for your entire life. And if someone's not familiar with that, they might not get someone seen by the specialist they need to see to be evaluated properly and get the full value of their claim. Um, yeah.
How about would you focus more on individual attorneys or the resources and reputation of the firm as a whole? What's more important?
Yeah, great question. I think both are important, but I think as long as the firm has at least a couple of really experienced attorneys where you can tell they're very experienced, they're good at what they do. I think even if you end up with a different lawyer at that firm handling your case, I wouldn't say that I would say at that point, really the resources of the firm matter more because I know at our firm, especially, we have a lot of collaboration among different cases. And so, and a lot of the older attorneys are mentoring the younger attorneys and the newer attorneys. And so, the resources of a firm, we have a lot of communication happening at our firm about, oh, I need an expert in this field. Who else has used an expert like this? And so some of our more experienced attorneys who maybe have used this particular type of expert on different cases will be able to provide that to our other. So the firms are, excuse me, the resources are shared among the firm, right? And a lot of the skills and expertise can also be shared. So I think having at least a couple of bios on that website that are like, wow, this attorney's really good is important as a baseline. But once you've established that, I think you can be confident that when you go with this particular firm that they're going to use whatever resources the firm has as a whole to get you the best possible outcome.
How about like referrals from other professionals, like a doctor referring to a law office or past clients? How important is that in your search, or how much weight do you put on those?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would put a similar amount of weight as like a Google review, right? Because basically that's just like saying, hey, I've heard good things about this firm. It's not very specific. If it's from a doctor, sometimes doctors have relationships with firms. And so I would put a little bit of weight on that. You know that then the doctor you're seeing has a good relationship with this firm, so that's helpful. But for a catastrophic injury case, um, I think I wouldn't put as much weight. I think I would definitely take those referrals and do my research and look into the firms, right? Because obviously, if a loved one tells me that they had a good experience with a law firm, um, that holds a little bit more weight to me than a random Google review. But it might not hold as much weight as 100 Google reviews that say something different, right? So I would still do my research. And also, I think it's important to note that some people don't understand that lawyers really do specialize across the course of their career. And so I would not, take a referral to a divorce attorney for a catastrophic injury, personal injury case, right? So the type of law they practice really matters. Even if you have a referral from a friend, this lawyer is really good. Are they good at the particular type of case that you have, right? That's
Hmm.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this is a similar type question. Like, how much weight do you put on like communication style and rapport versus like the objective criteria, the like their track record and their experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So um, I think that the rapport is important, but similar to what I said about like more minor cases, the day-to-day people who are working on your case, your attorney is obviously looking at your case. If it's a catastrophic injury case, especially, your attorney is in that case every day. But attorneys sometimes don't have the best, the word that's coming to mind is bedside manner. Like sometimes they're a little bit harder to talk to, but they're really good at what they do. So I think the results that the attorneys get matter. And then I think the most important thing about rapport is, are the people that you're talking to on a daily basis easy to communicate with? So your case manager, the intake person you talk to who signs you up, right? I get calls from current clients who are looking for communication, and I'm able to help with that. So um, in terms of rapport and communication, I think the team matters more than the specific attorney on your case, having good rapport with your team. Because
Yeah,
your
because you're
your case
talking to them.
manager, yeah, and your case
Yeah.
manager will be able to communicate something to you from your lawyer, maybe in a better way than the lawyer would, because the lawyer has a lot of experience, and I've met many lawyers who are amazing at what they do, but when they talk to people, it just goes right over their heads because they're using all this legalese, right? And like don't necessarily know how to sort of make it accessible to an everyday person who doesn't have law expertise, whereas that's the case manager's job, right? So I think especially your case manager and your legal team, your the people that you're talking to on a daily basis, that's really important to have good rapport because you want to be well informed about your case and what's happening. But for the attorney specifically, I would say their experience and results matter a little bit more than the rapport that you have with them.
How about how many consultations would you typically recommend before making a final decision on what attorney you should hire?
I think that for this question, it really is different whether you have a smaller, more minor, like kind of everyday car accident case, which again, like you said, might be really devastating and life altering, but maybe you have, whiplash and you have to go to treatment for a few months. I think that's very different than a catastrophic case. So for a car accident case, I think if you make one phone call and you're comfortable talking to that person, sign them up. Go
Yeah.
with the person that you feel comfortable with. You don't have to necessarily have multiple consultations for that. For a catastrophic injury, I would say most important is to do your research before the phone call. And I say that because these phone calls can be really emotionally draining. I can tell when I'm on the phone with clients. I mean, it's draining for me. I can, and I didn't even go through what these clients went through. And these are clients who have been through a catastrophic injury, something that really changed their life. And retelling the details of that to someone can really take a toll. So I would not recommend doing a ton of interviews or consultations because it can really just be draining on the person. Do your research in advance, right? do research on multiple, maybe, 5 to 10 law firms. You could look them up, look at their websites, look at the Google reviews, and then narrow it down to a few that you think, okay, these firms have the attorneys that have the skills that I need. They have good reviews, and then call those ones, just a few, and have consultations with those and see who you feel you can trust the most, see who is the most forthright with information about their expertise and your case and that kind of thing, and just see who you feel most comfortable with after a phone call. Because once you've narrowed it down based on researching the firm, I think it's really hard to go wrong. And at that point, it's more about what kind of relationship you can have with them.
What are some red flags that would make you cross a lawyer off of your list?
Yeah, one big red flag is making very grand, very specific promises after just an initial consultation. I think a lot of lawyers want to, make you feel like they're going to really be able to get you a really good settlement because they want you to sign up with them, especially if you have, for catastrophic injuries, attorneys really want those cases if they're solid cases. And so they might be able to tell after the first initial consultation, oh, this is a solid case. I want this case. I'm going to maybe exaggerate what I think I could get for this person, so they'll sign up, right? So if they're making you a really big, it sounds like maybe an exaggerated, too good to be true kind of promise about what kind of settlement you're going to get, or even any kind of specific promise about a settlement you're going to get after an initial phone call, I would be suspicious of that. Because one thing that I tell clients all the time, because I know clients really want to know, what am I going to get? That's a really big question. And I understand wanting to know right up front what you're going to get. But the reality is, it can take days or weeks to do fact gathering and understand all the ins and outs that might affect your case and might affect the kind of settlement you could get. And so we don't like to make big promises about what kind of settlement we can get for you until we have all the facts. And I think that is important. That's that transparency piece, right? We want you to work with us if it's a good fit, but we're not going to overpromise and then let you down later just because we want you to sign up with us, right? And so if you feel like someone's maybe overpromising, I would trust your gut and say, that's probably not a good sign that they're going to be, truthful and upfront with you about in the future about things that are happening with your case.
Yeah, I feel like people want to know in advance, and what makes it hard is, we don't know the extent of their injury when they're typically
Mm-hmm.
calling us. I mean, sometimes they're calling us a week or two after the accident.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know if that injury is going to be a 3 month injury or a 6 month injury or a permanent injury, because sometimes they don't think that they're hurt that bad, but then the injury just doesn't go away and it
Right.
becomes a lingering injury that, so the value can, a 3 month injury versus a 6 month injury versus a permanent injury, those values are wildly different. So
Mm-hmm.
it's tough
Yeah.
to say. Yeah.
And I think it's really good when people call us, a week after it happens, because then we can get in on it quickly. When you have a lawyer involved that soon, then you have, like I said, the lawyer has more ideas about how to make sure you're getting everything that you're owed, right?
Yeah.
And so having a lawyer involved early on is really good. But yeah, it does make it harder to assess the value at that point.
Yeah. So what's the single most important factor in your view that can, you know, affect a case?
Yeah, I think in terms of finding an attorney, I think for a catastrophic injury, I think the most important piece is communication and follow through, right? This is someone who, if you have a catastrophic injury, if this is something that's really affecting your life, you might be working with this attorney for years on this case. And so having an attorney that is willing to, call you to check in, right? And if they make promises that they can follow through with those quickly, right? Um, so that's why I think it's also important not to, if someone's making a really big promise, but you won't know whether that promise is going to come true until years down the line, that's maybe not something that they can actually promise you with a lot of certainty, right? But making small promises up front and then following through, I think builds a lot of trust. And that goes to that communication piece. Is this person, or is this law firm, going to be able to keep you informed? And I think there's a balance there of keeping that you informed without over communicating and making you stressed out to the point where they're constantly asking you for things. So there's a balance there, but I think follow through and communication are the most important pieces when you're looking for an attorney. Like I said, after you've done the initial research, right, to find an attorney with the right kind of experience and expertise and stuff.
Yeah, I've had situations. So, for me, we've hired and fired and had many, many litigators over the years. And even you get two separate lawyers who can both get good results. Clients can be much more happy with the one who communicates with them and puts them at ease. Because this
Mm-hmm.
process sometimes, especially for the catastrophic cases, can last 3 years or more
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And so when you're communicating with your lawyer or your case manager fairly often throughout that process, if a lawyer can actually put you at ease and make you feel comfortable, it makes a big difference, even if they uh, end up getting the same result.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
also think it's really helpful to be able to be honest with a client without putting stress on them. And that's sort of what you're saying is like put them at ease, right? There are a lot of things in the legal in this field in catastrophic injury cases where we just don't know until we know. And so there's a lot of sort of, waiting to see what happens. And that can be really stressful for people. But I think, again, I wouldn't trust someone who overly promises something just to reassure you and try to calm you down. There is a balance, and having a team that's able to be honest with you about where we're at, but also reassure you that we've got your back, right? I think this goes back to it's not just this area of law, right? This is a skill that's important in any professional that you're hiring. I was talking about my experience as a public defender and how even when I didn't get a result that we wanted, my clients, because I was able to empathize and communicate with them in a way that built trust, they trusted that I did everything I could. And that gave them closure and they felt humanized, right? And so that's also important for our clients, for anyone who's doing personal injury cases. It's important to make sure your clients know that you're doing everything you can to get them the best settlement possible because it is really unpredictable. Sometimes the law is against you or you just cannot get the settlement that you want, but really the closure is really important to know that you did everything you could and that your firm did everything they could.
Are you ever going to go back into being a lawyer?
I doubt it. I have learned so much, and I really enjoy being able to use the legal knowledge that I've gained after going to such a wonderful school, and having the experience of being an attorney. But I really do just enjoy talking to people about their cases. I think I've realized that this is something that I'm both good at and I enjoy. And so
Yeah.
of course, that could change. I have ADHD, so who knows what's going to happen in my future career. Anyone else with ADHD knows I could change my mind next week. But yeah, I really love where I'm at right now. I see myself doing this for a while.
Awesome. Thanks, Mallory, for helping everybody in their search for a good lawyer. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.